This is Sarah Murray, Business and Crop Online Editor for Top Producer, and I'm visiting with Jerry Gulke, the owner of Strategic Marketing Service and a Top Producer columnist. Today we're talking about USDA Supply and Demand Report. Jerry, can you give us some of the highlights of the report?
Well, yes, there wasn't a whole lot done that wasn't expected, I guess. It just confirms that maybe we have bottomed out in this demand destruction debate that we've been talking about. The government raised feed usage by about 50 million bushels, and I think that's on ideas that there was incentives to feed cattle longer, and that there maybe perhaps there are more hogs did not decrease as much as the government thought they would at this time. They reduced feed, seed, and industrial usage, which would probably be corn oil or food that we eat of some sort, but about 10 million. They left ethanol unchanged, again, at 3.7 billion bushels usage this year. And that's interesting to note because they've been pretty staunch in saying, ethanol is not going away. It's going to continue to be used, in spite of putting some people out of business and breaking them and going bankrupt. We're still seem to be at least crushing the corn for ethanol. And anyway, as a result, we lowered the carryover this year down to 1.7 billion bushels, down about 40 million bushels. And the key is that carries into next fall, which is going to be on top of what we produced this year. And, of course, 40 million bushels isn't a lot, but you got to remember 1 million acres is about 150 million bushels. So we use this year about 250,000 acres of next year's corn already. And, some thought in that acres report that would be, that we weren't reducing corn acres, that would be bearish, and it hasn't been. And in soybeans, they raised exports like we thought because China is buying more, and, of course, Argentina's got a problem. Of course, Brazil's shipping is maxed out, so they come to us. And I guess the key that I look at in this situation is a lot of the other countries that were buying worldwide weren't near as aggressive as China. So they've been lagging while China's been taking up the slack. And the question is, will China max out now, or will they continue to buy like they have been, and will these other countries come in and make up the difference and start buying more? Some in the industry think that carryover, which the government's now got down to 165 million, they think it'll drop to 100 million bushels. And, of course, they're thinking by the end of August that's true. We'll see what happens. And if we would see China cancel some exports or Argentina suddenly get religion and get life and start selling again, then I think we'd see a pretty good setback in the soybeans. But for now, we've got back up on these prices that look pretty good.
So since in this report they did reduce the carryover for the major four crops, will that affect the farmer's crop mix at planting time?
Well, I don't know. The question that, and kind of the surprise I had in the report, on the 31st, was the government made a comment, both in their outlook meeting on the end of February in Washington, and then again they said was confirmed by the actual surveys from farmers last month that said that there might be 5.1 million acres that goes unplanted due to economic conditions. And I'm thinking, boy, that's a stretch this early in the year. However, so we started looking back, and we looked back and said, okay, what were the prices when we increased corn and bean acres? And we found, we always say, well, acres come out of the woodwork, when prices are high. And Informa and some of those in USDA will tell us, well, these acres are laying idle, and somebody says, okay, I'll plant them now that you got $6 corn. Well, I went back and looked at that, and lo and behold, the prices that we were looking at this year to make our planting decision surveys, I guess you'd call them, were about what they were in 2007, not 2008. So we've obviously dropped our prices that the Board of Trade, at least, is offering us. And then in the meantime, our input costs have gone up. So it makes perfect sense that marginal land might get set aside. And we asked some of our clients and said, do you plan to do that? And they said, well, yeah, I got 40 acres that's kind of highly erodible. At $6 corn, I'll plant it, but otherwise I think I'll put it to grass and we'll cut it for hay because hay is expensive. The question is now, if the market believes that we need this corn and beans to get by until next year's crop is planted, will they now decide, or the marketplace say, we need to bid prices high enough now to get those acres back into production so we got a cushion in case we don't get a very good crop? I've gone ahead and extrapolated out these numbers, and my crop surveys were a little higher in corn and a lot higher in beans. I brought them back. and said, all right, if we plant another 700,000 acres of corn and another 500,000 acres of beans, by chance, what would happen if we got only last year's yields? And if we don't get this proverbial two bushels an acre increase in corn, 2.5, and then maybe in the USDA's got a pretty good healthy yield in there of 42 bushels, I believe, for next year. What if it's 39.5 like it was last year? We got a tightness problem in soybeans that doesn't go away this year. In fact, it would be we would be looking at about 125 million bushel carryover versus the government's 300 bushel carryover. So really critical as to how many acres did we get planted and at what yield are we going to get this year. So it's going to be another one of those years where we're not going to know really until June 30th and how this thing's going to look. And then, of course, weather is going to be even more important this year than it was before.
So going forward, what other numbers in this report or upcoming reports should farmers keep an eye on?
Well, I would watch China. Any hints? They're building their stocks, and they now have adequate stocks domestically to buffer any kind of extreme move in soybeans. They did it last March, a year ago, where they had they dumped their domestic soybean oil on their market to curb speculation. We've just about, with the government and the Congress and everybody else mad at the speculator, blaming him for everything except global warming, he's gone. Board of Trade volume now by everybody is down about from 40 to 60% in some commodities. So you can't hardly get a speculator out there that wants to buy anything. The stock market, grains, he wants a story, and there's some doing it, but nowhere near the kind of volume and liquidity that we had last year. So if we see for some reason soybeans going up another $1 or so, that'll bring some beans into production in the United States. But then China might just say, all right, that's enough. We're not going to inflate this thing. Let's dump a few beans on the domestic market, or let's cancel a cargo of beans. So I look at it as to myself, can the world really consume $12 soybeans and $5 cash corn, or say $6 on the Board of Trade? I doubt we'll get that high without a crop problem, but even $5 corn can. When I was in Washington talking to the people that put this survey together a couple months ago in December, they said, just remember, Jerry, if we don't plant the acres, there's nothing you can do with $5 corn, and $12 beans and $8 wheat, $9 wheat. If it goes there, you're going to curb demand even more. So looking ahead, I think, it's really how the market's going to look at this thing, and they're going to say, well, the stimulus is working, our economy is back on track again, and gosh, we're going to eat a lot more meat and everything, so you got to get cattle high enough to pay me $5 for my corn. The hog guy is going to have to liquidate some hogs in order to get the hog prices back up. The chicken guy is already liquidating. He's down to where the price is up, but he's not consuming the feed. So I find it very hard to believe that in a fundamental standpoint that we got much more than 50 cents to go in corn and maybe $1 in soybeans under a screwy deal this spring with weather. I would look to be pricing some grain on a surge because thinking we may not get it planted. And, of course, then we'll if it gets high enough, we'll probably curb demand some more. The livestock industry and the poultry industry just can't stand much more of this unless our economy supports a lot higher prices in cattle and hogs. All right, and one final thing, what you really want to watch today, I believe, is how the market closes. We've been anticipating a good market, a good crop report this time, not a bearish one, and we got it, neutral to friendly. Certainly it may indicate that we're not going to get any worse in demand. So how this market closes, going into a 3-day weekend, and we all know weather, it changes like the wind. We're looking wet and cool for April. What if we come in here? Who wants to sit here with profits if you're a speculator and say, what happens Sunday night if they come in here and say, wow, we just had an abrupt change in weather. It's going to be 70 degrees in northern Illinois, and Jerry's going to get his planter out next week, and I guess we're going to make it after all. So what will Argentina do over the weekend? So I'm thinking if this market opens higher, which they're calling it higher, how do we close? And if we don't see profit taking and we don't see this thing sell off to at least close unchanged to down even today, we got a pretty good market going. There's somebody out there that's willing to take a risk and saying, I don't care what you think is going to happen, Jerry. I don't think you're going to get the crop in the ground, and I need to give you a fiscal stimulus to keep that planter going even well into May, even if beyond what you normally would, just to get that corn in the ground. So how we close today will be important as to what the whole world thinks of these numbers that trade at the Board of Trade.
All right. Well, thank you very much.